Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Zach Posner, and I'm a co-founder and managing partner at the Legal Tech Fund. I am thrilled to be here with my friend Chris Combs. And today on Legal Tech Briefs, we're going to dive into his background, how he got here, and really get you up to speed on what's happening with LinkSquares, because it's pretty fascinating. But for those that don't know, LinkSquares is an AI-powered contract lifecycle platform. It's trusted by more than 1,200 clients, including DraftKings, Wayfair, and the Boston Celtics. And I think that may have been a fun one because these guys are located in Boston. Chris, though, is a serial entrepreneur. This is not his first time at the rodeo. He's done a lot of fascinating stuff we'll dive into. At LinkSquares, he's helping to redefine how legal teams operate by bringing speed, intelligence, and strategy to every contract. So, Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Maybe before we get into some of the heavy stuff, if you could give a little bit of maybe the shape of LinkSquares today, like what it looks like, what it feels like, and then we can jump into other things.
Yeah, happy to kind of share a little bit of background about the story and what sort of fast forward to today. The concept for LinkSquares really started back a decade ago, which is crazy to say. We were at a cloud security company. My co-founder Vishal and I went through an acquisition as mid-level employees of that company, and throughout the acquisition, due diligence period, and into the integration, they came to us and asked us a lot of questions about things we'd agreed to in our terms of service with the existing customer base. It was about 5,000 customers in total. So that was the first time that we realized that we had allowed a process through the negotiation to have for red lines, and each contract was kind of unique. And so we realized that we didn't really understand what we'd historically agreed to here in the middle of a quite big $100 million plus acquisition. And so that was the aha moment for LinkSquares, that, wow, here we are in the middle of this, and neither side really fully understands the type of customer obligations and risks that have been agreed to. And so that started us on a journey. Neither of us were lawyers, but we started on this journey of understanding what companies have agreed to historically in their contracts, and how they can use that information and data to better inform what they're doing across their business, week to week, month to month, quarter over quarter. And fast forward to today, we're about 300 employees based here in Boston area. As you said, thousands of customers that trust us with their most important business agreements. And we've processed about 10 million agreements in total. So we have a ton of data that we use the statistics around to really help and inform what folks can better do, and better insights for their existing agreements and ones that they may be signing in the future. And so it's been a really fun journey for us. Again, 10 years in the making. So it's crazy to say that, but we've really been very fortunate to have so much success, and supported by 162 million in venture capital funding across 4 rounds. Some great investors that have been a pleasure to work with.
I'm glad you rounded out those last couple numbers, because you just said fast forward, but you didn't mention, there's a 10-year overnight success story, right?
Right. Exactly.
You actually touched on a lot of stuff there, and maybe as a technologist geek at heart, something that I want to click into a little bit is the concept of technology, data. And I'm curious, knowing that you're passionate about product, like the technology 10 years ago versus today, how much of a shift has this been? And kind of what does that look like, assuming there has been a shift? What does that look like internally with the team and things along those lines?
Yeah, so we were the first company to sort of pioneer AI in this space. And again, fortunate to be in Boston, where we could build a data science team in 2016 from folks like Brown and Harvard and MIT. And this had really not been done before we started trying to tackle it. So there was no roadmap. We were, with machetes cutting through the jungle, trying to find how AI could potentially impact the legal space. I mean, we started with the thesis that companies really didn't fully have access and availability into what's in their historical agreements. Then we realized that AI could be massively disrupting and be a way to help facilitate this evolution and change, where legal teams are now at the forefront of using data in their business and using software and analytics to run their teams just like other teams like marketing and sales do today. And so uh, we originally pioneered some of the first extraction algorithms that could extract key information like dates, monetary values, and other risks and important information. In our experience, we learned that assignment clause and change of control were going to be critical as well. And so we rolled out about 100 different data points, and have successfully extracted those. I think we're up to around 700 million data points extracted across our customers. So we've been doing this for a while, but what's really fascinating is that is been somewhat of a table stakes and commodity now. And so we're looking at a world in which agentic AI and generative capabilities are sort of the next frontier. And so we're excited to continue to pioneer that, just like we did a decade ago. And if you've seen us in the news recently, we just launched some new agentic capabilities that can help companies with risk scoring, redlining, and other automation features that we've rolled out in our platform.
When you see, all of this data does that kind of, how informative is that to kind of like product strategy and things along those lines?
Yeah, privacy is obviously at the forefront of what we do,
Sure.
working with lawyers and knowing that we hold a company's most important business agreements. We take that really seriously. As you can imagine, our background is in security. So when we look at the way our algorithms work, they work on an individual customer basis. So, most folks know about LLMs and large language models, but there are also small language models and capabilities to focus on insights and information specific to that customer and their historical agreements. Obviously, we take the statistics of all of that information and use that to better form how our algorithms and how our information performs at a high level. But it's just that. It's just helping us inform and better say, hey, could we tweak this algorithm to better incorporate dates from, European countries? We're across 70 countries as well, so international customers. So you can imagine the nuances with something like an effective date, how it's written in the North America versus how it's written in Europe. And so we're constantly using that information to inform and give our customers more data and accessibility.
I've had the privilege of getting to know you over the last couple of years, and at some point, and I think it was even more recent, you gave me this construct that said, look, the legal department is the last one to kind of adopt technology in a meaningful way, which we agree with. And that's why you're so excited about what you were doing back then and probably right now. And I'm curious, like, where do you think we are in the life cycle of adoption for platforms like yours? Do you think
Yeah.
we've barely scratched the surface? Do you think the last couple of years you've come a far way? Or like, how do you think the market
Yeah,
looks?
I think we're still in the early innings. I mean, this is a monumental shift in the way legal teams work that we've seen. And when we first started, the conversation was really around, why do I need a CLM? And fast forward to today, it's more just which one do I think is the best one and the right fit for what we're trying to accomplish as a business. So the conversation has already evolved dramatically. And that shift you're talking about, I think, is still happening, right? There's, if you look at other departments in a company, they're almost all run by software, right? Take marketing, you're running HubSpot, Marketo, those type of product to essentially have information and dashboards and run your team, right? So legal was kind of the last white space that we saw as we got more into this. and started raising funding and talking to our investors about the market, that this was really the last group of departments that wasn't being run by software. And so I think that you and I talked about that at maybe your first legal tech summit, right? And so fast forward to today, that shift is still happening, and I think that the market, every business in the world deals with contracts. So the addressable market for legal is relatively big, and I know that you guys and your thesis at the Legal Tech Fund is also that we're still in the really early innings of all this.
And how much do you think generative AI is changing things or has the capacity to change things? I mean, do you think it's like we agree it's wide open, but do
Sure.
you feel like, in certain countries like Africa, they skipped like building out landlines and went right to mobile devices?
Mm.
Like, you feel like generative AI is going to have those types of opportunities, or do you feel like, no, we need to get the basics of the workflows right first, and then we start thinking about some of these generative tools?
Yeah, I think that really the thing that we think about most when we think about the future and what we're building in our platform for our customers is really on the agentic side. And if you can imagine a world where a lot of the tasks that a user may just log into a platform and do, for example, in our platform, it could be running a query across signed agreements to understand, what type of privacy uh, impact could be changed if GDPR in the UK changed some regulations. And so, what is their privacy status, and how is that evolving? Do they need to update their agreements? If you can imagine a world where you're querying in a chatbot and you're saying, "Hey, can you pull these agreements for me and tell me what the privacy language looks like?" And it's running that report for you and giving it back to you in real time. And then you're able to ask it to say, "Hey, can you then take this information, build me a spreadsheet that includes all of these clauses and note any ones that have deviated from our standard privacy language," right? And so, in doing that in an automated fashion, so it's at your fingertips versus the world that it was maybe 5 years ago, which was like you have to have someone, administrator log
Yeah.
in, build all of this out, right? So I think that's really the shift you're going to start to see, is that not only can it be prompted to do something like this, but you could say, "Hey, in the future, could you provide me this report every 30 days?" And now you have a system that's providing you insights on the fly versus kind of in a reactive way.
And I'm sure connecting the dots, if all the contracts live within LinkSquares, that you're the logical partner for that. I when that world that you asked me to imagine,
Mhm.
is that, and I'm sure you guys are experimenting with some extent to that now, but when do you think that that's business as usual? Is that a year, 5 years, 10 years?
I think it's under a year
Oh,
potentially. I
wow.
mean, in terms of our ability to make that available to our customers, I mean, we're already heads down working on what we believe is really the future of CLM, and so I think that when you combine that with the fact that there's a large market adoption occurring, um, I think that a couple years is reasonable to say that, like, just as in why do I need a CLM turns into which CLM do I need, turns into, you know, having this stuff already available. And it's more of just a plug and play type analytics information. So,
All right. Are you okay if we like zoom out a little bit, talk a little bit higher level about legal tech,
sure.
and then excuse me, would love to talk about. I know you've mentored a ton of startups, and would love to talk about just some of your experiences as an operator. But on the legal tech market, do you feel like there's uh, overlooked opportunities, underutilized opportunities? Do you feel like there's a lot of stuff out there still, or how well do you feel like the opportunity set remains?
I see a lot of amazing companies here in Boston, but largely everywhere, right? Even outside the US. So I think that there's a ton of amazing companies. People are starting to see this as a real opportunity. In CLM specifically, obviously, there's a lot more players that have come into the space. I mean, it's getting quite crowded. We're fortunate to be kind of one of the first movers, and have that critical first mover advantage and growth advantage. But there's a ton of activity in that space. But I even look at other spaces like IP, and data rooms and things like that, that you're seeing a AI first version of a product come out.
Yeah.
So it's solving the same business case, but it's with an AI first platform. And so and the other thing I would probably note is that it used to be done by angels, and that was the typical makeup of these, but you're starting to see some reputable venture firms come into the space. A16Z is one that I know you and I have spent some time with, and groups like that you would consider to be like really the most active investors are now starting to actively invest in the space.
To go a little bit higher, you I think you even note on your LinkedIn page you love mentoring companies. How do you think about, what type of advice do you give companies when they're getting into this space, when they're thinking about their first cohort of customers, and maybe what are some of your general learnings about legal tech in general?
Yeah, I mean, part of what I like to do is tell our story and tell how we went about our fundraising and customer adoption approach. And so uh, if you rewind briefly, we were more in the latter spot that I described, which was not a lot of active VCs in the legal space in 2016, 2017. And so our first fundraising efforts really didn't go that well. It was a lot of conversations of like, why are you working in contract management? Contract management's been around for decades. There were solutions developed in the early 2000s, and companies like IBM and all these big companies are in the space, and turned out that the thing they weren't considering was the shift with AI and how AI would impact the market. But for us, we were faced with a challenge of, well, what do we do? We're not really ready for venture funding, but we have a business, we have a really good thesis we're feel strongly about. So we ended up just focusing on our customers. And as I mentioned earlier, we weren't lawyers. So it was really important for us to say, hey, we're not the experts, but we can find people that are the experts, and we can lean on them to make sure we build this product in the right way. And so I think that was a competitive advantage, just not having that feeling of, oh, I know the answer. It was more a feeling of like, we need to get really smart people around us that can help us find these answers. And so that led us down a path where we had some really strong adoption of our product, because we were building exactly what the folks at DraftKings and Carbonite and Pegasystems and some of our early pilot customers were really wanting. We got to sit in their back office and learn from them directly. And so that really led us down this path where we said, you know what, we can't control how an investor thinks about the legal tech market, but what we can control is how we work with our customers and how we bring customers on and get them using our product. And so we actually went heads down and said, let's slow down on the fundraising side. Let's focus on building a great business. And so we got to 1 million in ARR before we really started getting our first institutional checks. And so founders are always shocked to hear that, because it's like, well, I just want to go raise funding. And I'm like, well, just for reference, like, here's how we went about doing it. And once we got to 1 million ARR, wow, the fundraising was a lot easier then, right? The process of talking to investors and getting investors interested, when you have real traction and real customer usage, and they can call a reference customer and hear an amazing story, that makes life a lot easier. And so that's usually the first place I start with folks is when they come asking for funding, I usually remind them that the best way to fund your company is through paying customers.
No, and I'll bet that that has continued to shift the culture of your company today. Where opposed to we see other, we see companies that are 4 days in or trying to raise millions of dollars of funding. And while yes, they may work and they may do everything perfectly, another
Mm-hmm.
thing is just like, hey, stick heads down, build a business the old-fashioned way, have optionality. And I'm
Right.
curious, do you think that has impacted your culture and has that stayed with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it has. I mean, if you look at our scores in G2, we're the number one ranked CLM, and that's not something you pay for. That's your users providing reviews of how they are interacting with your product and their product experience. And so um, I think that making sure that we continue to be a customer centric company and culture is sort of at the forefront. And people always say, "Oh, wow, you raised $160 million." Well, that came on the backs of these stories that I'm telling you, right? It
Yeah.
wasn't like that happened first and then we figured all this stuff out. The funding was much easier and it came faster as we had more momentum with our customers, right? And so I think that's the nuanced thing that founders have to, always remember is that it can be really exciting and fun to go talk to people like yourself and spend time with them. But at the end of the day, like you, Zach, and the fund, you're going to invest based on the traction that they have and the customer experience that you're hearing about and the reference calls you're having. And that's obviously the thing that you and the founder want to connect on, right? That's where you're probably getting most excited about deals.
Chris, it's funny talking to you. So we interview a lot of CEOs on this show specifically, and people running companies your scale. Very rarely are they one of the co-founders. It's like professional managements were brought in at this stage,
Mm,
and you kind of we bucket the world when we think about when we think about AI and agentic stuff and generative. We kind of bucket the world into two different buckets. We say, look, who deserves to win this stuff? There's startups that get to create a brand new user experience and get to start today with some technology. Then there's like incumbents that in theory have access to some sort of, and the startups get to be innovative, and then incumbents that have proprietary access to data that may not be available otherwise. And I'm kind of thinking like you guys are somewhere in the middle of this journey. Like you talk like it's still day one, yet you're operating at some sort of scale and you have a lot. And I'm curious, like how you think of yourself in the company.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that we're one of the biggest independent players in the space now, and um, so we certainly think about that a lot, and it's important to us, not for the business itself, but for our customers to making sure that they have a great experience. And so, for us, we are really fortunate to be in an amazing spot. We were early in this trend, and so we got first mover advantage, and we got the benefit of a decade of scale behind us as we stayed focused on servicing customers and providing the best in class AI for them along the way, and kind of continuing to pioneer that a decade ago into still pioneering it today. And so it's a great spot to be in.
Yeah.
And you also are seeing a lot of movement around the bigger players in tech, Google, Salesforce, um, SAP, companies like that that are now actively starting to take notice. And so I think that the next 3 years are going to be really exciting in CLM in particular, but as you've noted and said, like legal tech in general is going to continue to grow exponentially as well.
Yeah, and we're looking forward to seeing you up there with those big names as well over the next couple of years. Can't thank you enough for spending a couple minutes with us. Really appreciate and value our friendship over the years, and it's been amazing to watch. What the team and you have done at LinkSquares, and looking forward to seeing how this plays out in the next couple of years. But we're rooting
Same
for you. And
here.
excited.
And I would note that it's been equally as fun to watch you build your fund and your startup from concept as well, right? Like this would have been a decade ago doing something like you're doing would have been almost crazy, right? So it's been really fun to watch you
But it would
guys
have worked itself
build your
out if it would have invested in you. All right. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for spending a few minutes with
Thanks,
us.
Zach. All right.